We are looking at the Rajiv Awas Yojana as a huge opportunity to really redress some of the profound structural distortions and skews that have crept in over the years. It's really attempting to bring about a paradigm change in the manner in which we've been looking at the whole issue of inclusion. So, first of all, we have a situation where the absolute numbers of urban poor are increasing. Second of all, we have a situation where the spaces available for them is actually shrinking. The third phenomenon is also that with larger numbers, we're actually seeing increasing deprivation and access to basic services. If you look at the way the program is structured, there is really a very, very strong focus on trying to revisit the entire urban planning, land use, land reservation paradigms. The Rajiv Awas Yojana program actually drew inspiration from, if I may say, two broad approaches. The first approach was the rights-based approach. The second broad approach is that of the economist De Soto. He basically popularized the approach that informality is one of the major constraints in developing countries, the informality and the lack of access to formal instruments that people can then use to access capital and integrate themselves with economic, with the markets. That is missing in many of the developing world environments. For De Soto's approach to work, clearly we have to give property rights, people property rights to the lands that they occupy. And that is the underpinning of the centerpiece of the Rajiv Awas Yojana scheme, where government is trying to incentivize states to bring in property rights or shelter rights legislations. And that is what is the basic condition for them to access entitlements and support under the scheme. On the property rights, the central government has drafted a model. We have had, in our initial dialogues with the states and other stakeholders, been told that it's probably raising the bar fairly high, and many states would have huge challenges in implementing it in the way, or enforcing or legislating it in the manner in which we have framed it. But we thought we needed to have the bar fairly high because clearly it's finally going to be the states which are going to enact. A couple of the states have already been fairly proactive. I can share with you here that Andhra Pradesh is expecting to legislate very shortly on this subject. Initial indications are that a number of states are looking at ways in which they can move ahead with the legislation. De Soto's approach, as I was mentioning, the second part of it is that these property rights must then be fungible, and we must then be able to get the markets to work, credit to flow, and this should become an instrument which the poor can then use. Ray clearly recognizes that there has to be a major effort made in this area, and as the first step, the government has put in place a credit mortgage fund where government will step in to give adequate comfort to the banks and the financing institutions which lend to this segment of the urban residents. We are expecting that the fund will become operational in the first quarter. Rajiv Awas Yojana is actually being planned in two phases. We're looking at the first phase over the next 2 to 3 years, where a large body of preparatory work really needs to be done. There's a huge effort which needs to go in to get the communities on board. For example, Bombay, the figure put out is that if 60% of the people are poor and live in slums, the total land area occupied is under 10%, it's around 8%. And of that, probably 60% is government-owned land, public land. So what we've decided is that in the interim period, we will actually invite proposals from cities and states, which even if they're not ready with the reform package or the legislative package, we will still start working with them. RAY has actually two windows. One is the existing informal settlements, upgradation of the existing informal settlements, but it has an equally large window which is to create fresh housing stock and release new land for habitats. We've seen huge amounts of interest from the private sector in getting into this segment of housing. So I think the third part of the effort, which is to get markets to work and get private resources to come in and augment the overall resource pool. So that is also certainly, we're seeing huge amounts of interest. And as we go along and as the program unfolds, I think we will certainly see more activity in this area.